respectmyregion.com, back again on another episode of the Cannabis Testing Podcast. Everybody, I have my co-host here today, Josh Swider. He is the co-owner, co-founder, founder, all the things, big boss dog over at Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs. Frankly, I interview too many people to remember all these goddamn titles. So with respect to you, Josh, you're the big boss dog. All things Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs. Folks, if you don't know what Infinite Cal does, they are your premier testing lab, a resource for anything pesticides, anything heavy metals, anything R&D. They'll help you get your dosing accurate, and they will work with you to make sure that you guys are hitting not the numbers that you want, but hitting consistency with a scientific, science-driven, science-based approach. We've talked numerous times with Josh over the last few months, over the last few years, about the importance of pesticide testing, how people lab shop. That's when a brand shops with different labs, which is normal, but when they're specifically doing it to get higher potencies or into that 30%, or even just, ultimately get things kind of skated by when it may not be what it is. And so I appreciate you, Josh, for being a guest. Today's episode is why pesticide testing is failing cannabis consumers. And I know you're excited to really dive into this because we have seen over the years, we've seen a lot of labs go down for falsifying results. We've seen a number of labs go down for just dirty labs, dirty everything, inconsistencies. The math doesn't math. And you are a very scientific driven individual. The math should always math. The science should always science. And you actually went out after our last convo and bought organic fruits, organic veggies, pears. You got not like physical pears, but you bought a pair of them, meaning you bought one organic, one standard. You tested them to see what was going on there. And we also have, obviously, your bread and butter is cannabis testing. So we are able to compare the two today. Josh, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for working with us on the RMR Podcast Network. It's so cool to have these conversations with you.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, we're always glad to come talk and maybe get a little nerdy and talk about some of the science stuff. Pesticides, and they say the safety testing, for me, kind of is what we do and why we're here. The whole reason why I'm in this industry is because I believe in cannabis and it should stay around. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see this thing get stamped like cigarettes did, or be the next cigarette of next time, because I know it's not going to be from the cannabis itself. It's going to be from contaminants or other things that are being done. So we're here to keep people safe and then keep pushing the limits of how to do so.
Now, when you are a lab and you do get paid to take results, you don't get paid to give them the results that they want, but you get paid to do a job, to complete a service. For people that don't understand the intricacies of that, can you break down just briefly why people in California, why these brands have to get testing, the role that plays, and the current culture of why it's not trusted, whether it's from consumers or from brands? Yeah. I think those three facets go together, and it's important to help bring clarity to that before we really dive into the actual topic today of why pesticide testing is actually failing consumers today.
Yeah. So, I mean, you take a step back and you say, like, when you went to legal cannabis, what was the difference between the legal cannabis and the illicit markets? All it really was the biggest thing, in my personal opinion, not because I do it, it's because the testing was added. Mm-hmm. He said, I want to stand behind this as a safe product to consume, and that's how we're going to bring it to the public in different states.
The states introduced standards to adhere to for the brand.
Yeah, they created a regulatory standard that says, this is the guideline for pesticide testing. This is the guideline for heavy metals testing, micro testing, whatever have you. Each state has a little bit different flavors on it, but they're all pretty similar. Some are very more expensive, some are less. And then they kind of put the labs, building this lab into their regulatory body system, that we're almost like the gatekeeper to the public. And everything, most states, before it goes to the public, it has to be tested. It has to be tested in the lab. So they put us in an awkward position. You're almost like a state employee because you're a state testing lab, but you're not paid for by the state, but you're doing the testing on behalf of the state and the citizens of the state. But then your mm-hmm. clients are the producers that are paying you. So it puts you in an interesting situation where if you put the wrong scientists in there that aren't scientists, that are more business oriented, they're not going to side for the state and the consumer safety. They're going to side for their customers and their profits. And that's one thing we've always seen in this industry. I think that's why this gets interesting very quickly. And then you go into these things like pesticide regulations. Each state has different ones. Mm-hmm. And say like California has a pesticide regulation of 66 currently, and that should be expanded. I mean, I've been saying that for years. We recently, in a few last couple of years, we did a bunch of studies. We expanded the list of 350 pesticides commonly used in agriculture.
Wow.
Found an additional over 70 pesticides on California cannabis on the shelves. Um, we also did this in illicit industries. This doesn't bear or change that much. It's interesting. I can go back to what we see in that, but we did a 350 panel. We saw an additional 70 common 20 of them. There's a lot of media on that. LA Times posted a bunch of stuff. Everyone else ran with stuff
Yeah,
afterwards.
that was the story over the summer, correct?
There's multiple stories over the summer, but the first one was about just the DC 66 failing, and the second one was about this extended pesticide list, looking at they did, I believe, the top like 50, 30, 40 brands.
Did you hear about Northwest Cannabis Solutions in Washington State? I'm here in Seattle right now, failing for 500 plus products.
Yeah, was that just pulled off the shelf?
It just hit recently over the last like month or two.
So I've heard Washington State, their regulators internally go shop the shelves, and then they do a 1,200 pesticide list on it. I've been trying to get that confirmed, and that's the kind of stuff that states should be doing.
Wow.
Because they got to make sure people are following the rules. So in like if anyone does pesticide regulations, so everyone, pesticide regulations common. This isn't new, Pesticides come out, they get produced by a chemical manufacturer. They have an intended use for a pesticide. Like this pesticide is going to be used on potatoes. Then they come up, do a study to see if the safety of it by looking at how many potatoes you consume a year, looking at averages and saying, hey, are people going to have no noticeable health effects, called NOEL limit. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of go through that, and then they pay millions and billions of dollars to get these things passed, but they have intended uses. You can't deviate from the intended use. So you have, each state will have its own pesticide regulatory body. Like California has a Department of Pesticide regulation. They call it the CDPR or the DPR. Other states have very similar ones. I mean, Michigan does. They all do them within the state departments. Those people are going to be regulating everyone's pesticide use on all their commercial crops. They are allowed to use specific pesticides at specific concentrations and specific spray times and how they spray it. But then they actually have limits that you can find on your agricultural goods or any of your products as well. But those agricultural products are not being found to contain pesticides they're not supposed to use. So the problem when you go into the cannabis sector is there isn't a lot of intended use. There's actually no intended use. They're starting to release in certain states ones that they allow to use, but still have action levels on final products.
Mm-hmm.
Like an example, the CDPR DPR released a list of, they just updated it again. And there is a problem with the updated list, so I kind of go over here. But they allow things like pyrethrins to be sprayed during the cultivation process. It's not while it's budding, but pre. And then they allow very low levels, and then they actually still have an action level of pyrethrins on your cannabis products. Inhalable products is 500 parts per billion. Like that's the thing that they're allowing right now because they deem safe. They just updated the list, and they threw a lot of other pesticides on there. And there's a column that says yes and no, and using on there because like people don't really read that column. And people were sending me emails like, "Hey, they approved this pesticide." I'm like, "No, it says no. You can't use that at all." So like, there's very few pesticides that are allowed to be used. It goes back to there's never been a scientific study to make sure someone's safe while using it. When you go into the cannabis sector,
especially for smoking cannabis.
Yeah. For use on cannabis material itself or agricultural products.
Maybe tobacco, maybe vegetables, maybe whatever.
So this is always an argument I hear, and people need to do their research.
Okay, hit me. What's the break the myth? What do we got?
Yeah, tobacco is mostly regulated. When you hear about tobacco regulations, there's a regulatory body or organization called Caresta. Caresta is a French tobacco organization funded mostly by French tobacco, and they do studies, but they're not doing studies. They're doing agricultural allowable limits. They're not doing a lot of them aren't human health studies on what happens when you consume them. They're saying what's allowable to put on your crops. And so they're never talking about action levels.
Well, that's a perspective to think about. What's allowable to put on your crops
versus what you should consume.
Yeah, those are two different ways to look at that.
Like, so the interesting thing is, I'm not trying to bash anyone or anything, but the DPR just copied and pasted those in the new proposed the memorandum they sent up to the DCC. about what the action level should be. So there was no real looking into these things. They just copy and pasted those limits.
So,
What
so we know that pesticide testing and that systematic legislative model, for lack
yeah.
of a better way of putting it, um, whether it's working or not is TBD. There haven't been studies based on what you should use. There's just been studies based on allowable use, because growing agricultural based things, historically we use pesticides at scale to manage problems, and thus our food has it. The things that come from the food has it.
Yeah.
Fruits, vegetables, etc., and thus those are all have allowable limits for consumption for humans, things like that.
And one thing to note too on agricultural crops, if you look at the U.S., normally for most agricultural crops, our allowable limits are so much higher than other places like the EU, Japan. And why I'm naming some of these
Is
countries,
this a good time for you to bring out?
those people live a lot longer. Like Japan has the highest length or highest human length, or how long you live. So it's a little alarming when you
And
guys
there
have
is historically a direct correlation between a variety of illnesses, viruses, diseases, life-threatening conditions, life-altering conditions that all correlate around fertilizers, synthetics, compounds, things that are made from gasoline. A lot of stuff is made from gasoline at the end of the day.
There's been a lot of approved pesticides in the last 50 years that are now not approved and banned in the U.S. and banned in the world because of the negative health consequences. But there was scientific studies at one time that said that they were okay to use.
That's
And
crazy to think
so,
about.
like, this is the things when we start introducing these things at mass scale, you hope you're right on it, and that's why I strongly suggest like you be cautious with this kind of stuff and doing this extra work, or if you are consuming a good amount of cannabis, to make sure, or any cannabis, you should be making sure these things are clean and they are being tested by a reputable lab, and then the producers you are buying it from are actually looking into this and doing a little bit more than what's generally required. I really think that's important. If you want to trust, if you're going to find trusted brands, there are a lot of them out there that go above and beyond to do these things and make sure they have a good product.
So this core episode, or the core topic for this episode, is all about why pesticide testing is failing consumers. It's not just pesticide testing for cannabis. It's pesticide testing in most products that would involve pesticides and growing things, period. And that's where we in America are already used to not hearing much about the pesticides on our fruit and vegetables, not hearing much about the food that's going into McDonald's. We just know that it's numbers and calories and fats and sugars. There's this culture of counting things like that. But these other countries, they operate a little bit differently, and a lot of them always have. And this is where some of the down parts of having a capitalist society, which I am for. That's some of the negatives, and it's always going to be a balancing act. Now, I want to dive into some of the goodies that I had AI help me do it, because I didn't even know what direction I should be taking this convo outside of like how are just we being failed. Uh, let's talk about Michigan specifically. This is this one of the two states that you operate in for your lab, Josh. I'm reading online. I googled cannabis testing news, and yesterday at 12:27 in the afternoon, a Michigan judge finds marijuana testing facilities launched by ex-cops violating testing results, specifically accused of artificially inflating THC levels and downplaying hazards in cannabis. So let's not talk about we can talk about the issues that all surround this, but let's focus on the pesticide testing of this. When they say the phrase downplaying hazards in cannabis, that obviously umbrellas pesticides in that as well, right? Because things are
I
like
gotta
they're
read more.
willing to inflate, then they're willing to pass things through that shouldn't be passed.
That's normally how it goes. Is the hand in hand thing is the inflation starts, the passing starts, it keeps going down to this fraud level. I'm not speaking specifically on this case or anything, but that's a generalization that I've seen a trend of it. And then you get to these complex things like pesticide analysis. Pesticide analysis is not just this easy task. Like I really people hope people believe and understand like the work that scientists do is not just
What goes into a pesticide analysis? Why don't you bring clarity to that? If it's like, because I've been to a lab, and to some extent, I feel like I'm in the fanciest commercial kitchen with a
yeah.
bunch of really expensive ovens and other machines that I really don't know what they do. So paint that picture for us, and please bring some clarity to
Yeah.
these to customers. When we go, if I'm a cannabis company and I grow, and I'm like, all right, cool. I got to get some R&D. I want to know what my products. I want to know if I'm passing. I call you up. You guys come pick up my stuff, and what happens inside the lab from there?
So, I mean, even to take a step back too, before just picking up a sample, you have to make sure you have a validated method to do so. So, what I mean by that is, you're going to start saying, I'm going to test cannabis, or let's say I'm going to test strawberries
Yeah.
for a
We had the
pepper
woman yesterday from Jen from Lyra. She used this word biosecurity.
biosecurity. It's
She
nothing.
felt that, I think when she said that, she was explaining like when you guys come pick up the samples, everything is like
Oh yeah,
safe
yeah.
and not going to be mixed, because she's living soil and
Yeah.
living soil organic, so she
So,
doesn't want it to be messed with to
yeah.
anybody
So
else's.
we can go back to just sampling out there. So like our techs will wear suits, like it's disposable suits, disposable gloves, and when they're going in between batch and batch or room to room, they're taking off these suits that are clean suits, so that they're not ever contaminating something themselves. So
Wow.
contamination of it. So that's just that's sampling. That's not even method validation.
You
That's
see,
just
that's important. That's what she was referring to, is just probably the level of cleanliness at which you guys were picking up and taking the samples.
yeah, because that's one thing that we take this as a science perspective and understand the levels of contamination that could be a problem from just soil or anything else or contaminating an issue. So we write very detailed standard operating procedures that all of our employees adhere to even do things like simple, like people think the trivial task of sampling of the batch. I mean, that actually does a
So
little
you
something.
guys are out there in your hazmat, gloved up, no hair. You're not just wearing a hoodie and your J's
Yeah.
or your Vans like I've seen other people when I went and picked up samples. You guys are fully, again, she used that word biosecurity. It's secure. The biomass is secured in with SOP backed, years and years of science driven process for that. You pick it up, you transport it. I'm sure it's secure there too.
So in the transport vehicles, we have climate control if they need it. If they don't, it just depends. And then it gets chain of custody over to the lab,
Yep.
and then get dropped off. From there, the samples get checked into a LIMS system, a laboratory information management system. It then gets categorized and starts down its road of being prepped. Gets pictures taken, made sure you make sure everything matches to the batch records. And most of the states are using metric. You check everything off, make sure it's coming in, certify you took the correct amount when it got back. If they took
It
20
is what
grams,
yeah, it is
20
what it
grams.
is. It is what it's supposed to be, and it's the proper amount.
And then from there, you go, you take it, you take your sample, and the first thing you have to do is to homogenize your sample. What I mean by that is any type of sample that you take, you homogenize it into one type of material. So you want to take like a flour, even make flour into a powder. So that becomes we use a cryo grinding technique for that for a section of the sample to make it into just a fine powder. Most of the samples we take go into a fine powder, because that's the only way you get a full homogeneous sample. So if I took a bud or a piece of gummy that has a high concentration of something versus other, you want it as a whole piece. It's just like the flour or anything else. You're kind of taking it as an average. From there, then we're going to do a pesticide prep. So when most of these states, they require enough pesticides, we're going to do two types of preps. So you have a liquid chromatography prep, an LC-MSMS. We use
Yeah,
mass.
it takes your little grinded up stuff or your powderized stuff, and you mix it in with a liquid medium, if you
Yeah,
would.
we're going to prep it. So our preps, we're going to have we have two preps. One pesticide sample is prepped two different ways, and then it's ran by two different instruments, and then put back together
Oh
into one.
wow!
So that's just a standard pesticide panel. It's not a trivial thing. So these things are prepped individually. We use a lot of internal standard spikes. So we use something called the isotopically labeled internal standards. It's a gold standard of doing mass spectroscopy. It's just pretty much you're changing out your deuterated for hydrogen or carbon 13s. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Pretty much it's just doing fancy things.
That's some technical chemical numbers and mathematics right there.
So we do these, and they're all these are found out which of those we have to use. The internal standards is based on a validation that took a long time, and it's all matrix master specific. Like cannabis flower has a different SOP or a reason that we're running it a certain way compared to a distillate, compared to a gummy,
Yeah,
compared to
so
a
each of them
chocolate.
has their own recipe
They
to
all
achieve
have
the
yeah,
end
they all
number.
have their own issues. So what you do as an analytical chemist, you're always solving for an issue. And what I mean by that is like you're going to have a problem, so you're putting that internal standard in there, so you take care of your extraction efficiency or your loss or something like that, and you're doing that so you can actually track it. And then everything else is ran off calibration curve. So we take it, do the preps, do filtering, get them ready. They come out in little vials. The vials then go back and do an instrument. Instruments, there's a lot of QCs and checks on them just to run an instrument and get it up for the day. You got to get it started, run it, make sure you get your checks passed, make sure you're within a variance of that. There's a small variance that we allow for the instruments even to start. Then after that, you're running a batch. Batches are controlled by quality control samples. You have blanks, as in someone prepped something out. They pretended like they had a sample, but they never had a sample, and they prepped everything during the lab. Every time we run a blank, you make sure, hey, is there no samples or no pesticides being seen? Because if you saw something in your blank, the guy that prepped that, they could have contaminated other samples. So that's just like something that we do every 10 samples.
Yeah, it's like double, triple cleaning before you even do
You're
something.
making sure that nothing happened wrong in the thing behind you at the same time. So you're running blanks, you're running instrument blanks, you're running quality controls, CCVs, continuing calibration verifications, you're running spike samples. So we do quality control samples, and like we take a known matrix, like a gummy that has no pesticides that we've screened before, and then we spike pesticides on the gummy. And then we prep that along with and make sure that all those pesticides that I spiked on it show up on the gummy at the right concentration. Like I said, this isn't trivial stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes in the background of just running a sample.
So this is crazy to me because I've heard so many people are like, yeah, I want to work with a facility that only does this, and this. I don't want the introductions of pesticides or anything into any of my stuff. And it's like, bro, what are you talking about? Like,
well, not everyone does it this way either, Joey. You asked me what I do. So we do hold a higher standard to a lot of stuff we do because we're analytical chemists. We're chemists, and we've been doing this this is our passion in life. You know what I mean?
How sensitive is this machinery in terms of if someone has a dirty product or doesn't follow their SOPs or doesn't follow the cleaning protocols, how sensitive is it? Because people love to make excuses and blame the person before them.
So imagine if you took like a good way to think about it is like an Olympic-sized swimming pool. If you took 1 grain of salt and threw it in there, that's what I'm detecting. 1 drop of something into an Olympic-sized pool.
That's incredible. So we're trying to find that. That's smaller than a needle in a haystack. That's a drop. Yeah. That's a salt grain in a pool.
Yeah, that's kind of like what you're looking at. You're looking at these part per billion levels, and that's why you can you end up seeing, like we're saying, that pesticides aren't that dangerous. No, they are. They can be very dangerous at these very low levels. So if you had high concentration, extremely high concentrations in final product, which I've been doing this for a decade now.
Concentration edibles, it does get concentrated.
No, concentrated like a distillate. I mean, I've seen distillates with 40 pesticides. I remember I saw one distillate with 60 or 66 pesticides in California, all over a part per million. Some of them I think were 150 part. They're in a part per thousand. So this stuff was so concentrated, ridden with pesticides, that I guarantee you, if you consume this, you're gonna get negative health effects someday.
You're gonna get what?
Negative health effects. I don't want to say you're going to get cancer. You're going to get something. You're going to get some kind of disease.
Shit's going to be wrong.
There's no doubt in my mind. People that smoke this stuff will one day get something, but to tie that whatever ailment they got back to that one thing, they won't. So that's the problem with it, because you have to think how many different bad things are associated with a lifetime of consuming products or doing this or that.
Which is why pesticide testing is not just failing cannabis consumers. Pesticide testing is failing all consumers here in America, as we have proof. Would you like to chat about the results of the food? I think this is an interesting point. One moment though. Let me shout out our sponsor, which is you guys. So our sponsor today is Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, folks. If you guys have any questions about pesticide testing, heavy metal testing, potency testing, R&D, or simply you guys just have any questions or concerns, Josh Swider and his team, like he said, they are chemists. They are for science, by science, from science, and they're pushing science throughout the culture and the industry of cannabis. That is why they are our partner. I held off for years and years. I held off from work, even asking Josh for money for years, because I was like, yo, I just need to learn. I need to trust you. I need to learn for the betterment of cannabis. And it took time. Big shout out to the Beard Bros for helping bring a lot of education to me and helping bring understanding and trust to this ecosystem, and helping us connect as well. And Josh, that panel that we did last year at Flower Expo Michigan was just so eye-opening as to the passion and concerns from people struggling in the space. And we wake up today, and I put together this show and to read the news yesterday coming out of the Metro Times, the Detroit Metro Times. We have, and this is again, allegedly accused, Viridis Labs long been accused of artificially inflating THC levels and downplaying hazards in cannabis, as found here and reported on the Detroit Metro Times. It's a rampant issue. We've been hearing about it. Now we're literally seeing people being accused on the major news networks, where we see this issue in California still. It's a tough situation to be in, and to be operating in this space, Josh.
Yeah.
You know, in your research as a scientist, what are the risks to consumers if they smoke or ingest this contaminated cannabis? Someone that's still buying trunk weed in the
Yeah.
South or in the Midwest, in this day and age of pesticides and all this other shit, is it even safe to do that? And what are some of the potential impacts of that?
So the interesting part, like people always like say, "Oh, this is cannabis. It's always been sprayed this heavily." Now, when we commercialized cannabis, this became a lot bigger ball game. So what I mean by that is like, I mean, you think back to back in the day when grows were like people's basements and stuff. I know basements can get big, or they maybe had warehouses. They weren't the size of what we see commercial cannabis cultivation is
And
today. They weren't,
they weren't on farms outside next to big strawberry fields or
or,
next to big flower plant fields.
or they weren't necessarily buying the commercial grade pesticides and spraying them either, because they didn't
Yeah.
have the willpower and know-how or the need. Because sometimes those indoor little grows, they never did it. They didn't care about the
I
bugs.
don't see a lot of growing. What are those grow stores, hydro stores they call them? I
Yeah.
don't see a lot of hydro stores with weed branding when I drive through the South in the middle of the country.
So, so you end up getting these pesticides. Kind of, my personal belief is that they've been using a lot more after it got commercialized. And what the health effects will be, well, that's the thing you're going to find out later in life. Consuming some of these highly contaminated products, in my personal opinion, I have no doubt in talking to doctors, medical doctors, research medical doctors, people in the pesticide space for a very long time. They have no doubt that these are going to cause negative health effects and cancer and other things. It just depends on the pesticide. Depends on what it's contaminated with. I mean, there's specific pesticides that if you have in that salt per Olympic sized swimming pool, that's a problem. Then you have other ones where you can be throwing in gallons and gallons of water and it's not a problem. So it just depends on the pesticides how harmful it'll be. They all have studies and tell you how harmful they're going to
Can
be.
I read off some of the information provided by ChatGPT here
Yeah,
today?
yeah,
I think that this is some of the common pesticides found in cannabis cultivation, and maybe you can speak to each of these. Um, Myclobutanol, often used as a fungicide,
yeah,
also called Eagle 20. When it burns, it can release hydrogen cyanide, a highly toxic gas. Health risks, respiratory disease, chest pain, nausea, headaches, and even neurological damage with prolonged exposure. Eagle 20 was commonly found in the early days of recreational.
yeah.
Um, and it still is found in use today. It's the scary that and it's number one on this list for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, EO20 was one of the most common ones that we would see all across the country for a very long time. It
How
seems like
often do you still see that now at this commercial scale in Michigan and California? Do you still see that in the list? Is it still pop?
you still see it because people use it, and so Eagle 20. Any of these pesticides, when we're talking about them, there's a use for them. In most states, you can use Eagle 20 on commercial crops, not on cannabis. So if you're growing next to someone that uses it, and they're spraying, there's things called overspray where you can get this overspray in your cannabis
Yeah.
product. And
So that's
then
on fruits and vegetables. Did that one pop on the fruits and things that you purchased at the store?
that did not. So
Okay.
I purchased these not too long ago. So a lot of the stuff is going to be indoor grown. Why I know that is because stuff doesn't make it in the winter. So there's
Are you
a
in Michigan right now, or are you in Cali?
this was done in California. The test was
Yeah,
done in
stuff
California.
that's out of season. Okay, so then
Yeah.
the second common pesticide, bifenthrin and permethrin, synthetic pyrethroids used as insecticides, can cause neurotoxicity, especially with chronic exposure, health risks, tremors, numbness, seizure, and hormonal disruption. What are you seeing bifenthrin and permethrin on various things in cannabis either?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We see it in cannabis. Both of them were more common. They're becoming less common in California and across the states. From what I hear, a lot of these are getting less and less. And I'll after we kind of go run through a few of these, I'll talk about something.
What run through what you were seeing off of the fruit one said.
Uh, so here I can share my screen and show you a couple.
We can do that.
Cool. So I pulled some of them up. So here, let's just look. We have bell peppers here. So I went and bought these 2 bell peppers. We took them, homogenized them, and you're getting these pesticides. These are parts per billion levels. chlorodiane, diafenazole. So this is an extended list of 350 pesticides. These are not crazy levels that I've seen before. These would be like, if people say this is on cannabis, this would be like patent. First of all, none of these pesticides are regulated in any of the states on cannabis.
So those could be on cannabis. They're not regulated.
Then you're not supposed to use them on cannabis. They're not supposed to be on cannabis, but no one checks. It's just like organic and other types of pesticide regulations or anything else. They state that you can't use these things, but a lot of times no one's checking. So we don't check for all pesticides on all products. So this is the bell peppers. Excuse me. And then let me grab this. Sorry. Bell peppers. Let me show you that's a regular bell pepper.
Those some blackberries or those blueberries?
Yeah, organic bell peppers actually had nothing.
Mm.
So if you take those down, I'm looking at a summary list just so if anyone wants to see the amount of chemicals we're scanning for.
Holy cow!
This is an expanded list of pesticides that we run. I think it's about 360. We do this on cannabis products too. We validate methods for cannabis products as well as we have food products and other things.
That's crazy, John.
So that's going above and beyond safety, and I can kind of touch on that. Which one's green beans? Green beans came back nothing on the green beans. They're pretty
pesticide free on the green beans.
Pesticide. I'm never going to say that. Pesticides that I scan for did not.
Pesticides that you scan for free.
Yep, pesticides that I scan for free. There was no detectable levels. Strawberries, the cyprinil. This is very common on strawberries that you end up seeing.
Okay.
So you see them, but then surprisingly enough, organic seem to. Oh, those are grapes. Sorry. I'll go organic strawberries. Organic strawberries had none. So organic seems to be hitting this list pretty well on this.
Wow.
And I've seen that go the opposite way as well, but this is a time shot, timestamp. Green beans, like I said, we saw them.
And you think a lot of this fruit was growing indoors? Are you able to tell through the pesticides used or the insecticides used, or are you able to tell?
So like a lot of times I can tell you that because like the time of the year I bought, you're buying things in off season. The only way you're going to be growing this is indoor. A lot of these commercial crops, agricultural crops, they can't last in that long. So these blueberries, maybe a month or so, you have to eat them. So if 6 months of the year, you can't grow blueberries anywhere in the world. They're grown indoors. That's why.
Is that greenhouse, or are you talking buildings and warehouses?
Greenhouses, normally greenhouses, hoop houses, warehouses, something with some kind of temperature control, somewhat.
Yeah.
And they'll grow them indoors. So the blueberries, you can see they both look clean. Grapes, which traditionally has pesticides. Only one pesticide at a very low level that we're seeing, and that's on regular grapes. Yeah.
How cool is
so
that?
Overall,
real pesticide screenings and panels here on fruits and vegetables. What grocery store was that at?
Can't say. I'm probably that's why I scrolled down a little bit for the picture, so it'll have labels. I don't want to go
no worries. We don't need you caught up in more. We appreciate you caring so much about consumers that you are willing to spend your own money to go do this and take the time to do all those processes and to follow the SOPs to help bring clarity to this. There is a lot of media out there that tries to scare us about our food being not as clean as cannabis, and this is literally an agricultural product showing you that it's capable of being done. Capable that you're able of being organic, capable of this, and obviously, what you're testing for is different, potentially than the required legislation in terms of what can pass or fail.
A lot more.
Well, obviously, that's what I'm saying. Just different. It's more. But in terms of what's allowed, because that's what this is about, right? And how that's failing us, that's a different conversation.
So I've done this before and seen or crops have more than cannabis. This was a surprisingly clean set of agricultural crops. It's more surprising to me. And I would say if people were to just use this one set of data and say cannabis is cleaner than food, I would say the answer is no. Because a lot of the cannabis that I end up seeing is not clean. But there is
cannabis isn't clean, and a lot of the food isn't clean.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. That's absolutely crazy to think about that, man. Now,
so I'm going to touch base on this too, just kind of go backwards a little bit because I said pause up. But we talked about like the 66 pesticides in California or Michigan has their 56, whatever it is. And when you do this panel of this 350 on it, what I saw in like the legal market is like the 66 pesticides are removed, as in like they stopped using them. And the scary part, when we saw some of it illegal, illicit, either any market, is we started seeing like high concentrations of pesticides on this 350 list, about 20 common pesticides being used on cannabis. And like you said it during this podcast, it's pesticide free. Well, yeah, if I didn't look behind the curtain at the other 300 pesticides, I would have said, hey, I stand for the 66 and this is pesticide free.
Yeah, and that's what things were started off as at the beginning. People were able to
Yeah.
say that, put a sticker on there, and tout, and able to tout that. And ultimately, it wasn't true. It wasn't true because they set it up for not success from the beginning, and
Yeah.
and then it was also not presented correctly, and then the bud tenders just regurgitated information from a sticker.
And then also like the sad part sometimes about not everyone in this industry, but there are people in this industry. They learned, hey, I can't use these 66 pesticides. The question became, what can I use that can't make me fail? And that's what you saw. Years of that going on. It cleans out systems sometimes. So like I always applaud other states or any internal state or any internal other labs that are willing to take a stance like this. I mean, you realize how many people like iCal pissed off by doing this additional pesticide screening? I mean, I talked about this in the beginning of the call. Who are my customers? They're the people growing this cannabis and producing the cannabis. Who are my real customers to me? The people. That's why I do this stuff. Who the state. Those are the people that we should be protecting the public. You own any kind of testing lab.
Yeah,
so like, that's kind of
you are the not to say the fail safe, but you are that layer, that filtration that's supposed to weed out the bad and what's good and safe for us consumers. And we talk about patients being a part of this. People with cancer, HIV, AIDS, chronic conditions, chronic pain, phantom pain, PTSD, domestic violence, all the way from war violence and traumas. There are so many things that it's pretty serious what a lot of people have to go through. There's a lot of horrible things on this planet, in addition to a lot of amazing things. And to have cannabis be available for people, and have a safe, legal option. It is supposed to be scientifically driven and make it more safe for these people buying it. And I applaud you for taking this stance, for sharing the knowledge. Where do you see things headed the next few months? We're at the end of Q1. Any big changes on the horizon? Anything you've been advocating or pushing for? Any big legislative changes for us in the testing world that we can see? Where are you at in all that world? I know you lead in that realm.
Yeah, I know there's a lot going on with hemp right now. People like say that, not. So when I say hemp, I mean what the hemp industry of today. It's not the hemp industry yesterday. There are good operators in the hemp industry still, but there's a lot of operators that are just pushing stuff and calling it hemp. I know we can say like, hey, this is weed for the people and weed for everyone out there, but the things that we're calling marijuana or cannabis or anything you want to call it in whatever state you're in, when you call it this hemp stuff and it goes into synthetic conversions and everything else, a soup of synthetic drugs and cannabinoids, it gets a little scary and the negative health effects on that. I think this year we'll see some stuff to clarify out with hemp and probably bring it back to the safety sector. And then what you see in the cannabis sectors is, and this is my personal opinion, is I think the regulators understand now maybe the testing system is a little broken. I'll say that myself, and they have some repair to do. So you're starting to see states around the country kind of pick this up and say, hey, maybe we need to do a little bit better. Maybe we need to be expanding our pesticide list. Maybe we need to be making sure the labs are doing their jobs and not failing the consumers, because the state's protecting the consumers, right? So I think that's what you're going to see this year. Is a lot more step up on that, and you're going to start to see more things like the news story you talked about coming out there that labs are maybe were found not to be doing their job, and hopefully we're going to see a cycle. We got to remember that the cannabis testing is an infant industry, and what I mean by that is all these testing industries go through hurdles and hard times that fail the general public. I mean, we can sit here and talk about a million different case and scenarios that this has happened over the last 50, 100 years. You can talk about EPA testing, you can talk about environmental testing, food testing, all this. All the testing had its issues and it's ran into these problems, and mostly it came down to the labs stopped doing what they were supposed to do because there was a financial benefit to do it wrong. and then some kind of industry had to be cleaned up. The EPA had to clean up their industry. The water boards had to clean up their industries. I mean, in all the states, these problems have happened, and the sad part is the people that suffer from it is the patients or the people like the cannabis people. This is what we're going through right now. Really, the thing that people can do if they really want to is get more involved. Start demanding it. Start demanding some kind of thing that we're going to make sure that these products are going to be as safe as possible when it gets to consumer, because there's no one out there should be consuming cannabis medically, recreationally, or they're using it themselves for some kind of ailment, like you talked about, the PTSD, anything. And one day they're going to be 10 years down the road, they found out they were using bad cannabis that created some negative health consequence for them, and maybe they're not around for their children.
People
So
like to minimize weed or simplify it down
yeah,
to, oh, weed is just weed. It's just the plant. Honestly, I'll come out. I fucking hate that. I
yeah,
can't stand that because I'm sitting here right now. I've had kidney stones 15 times. They always feel bad for me when I tell them that. Oh wow, they're so surprised. Oh, you, Joey. Oh, what? How did that happen? Did you ever figure it out? Man, I'm not even interested in sharing that information when weed's just weed, right? A plant's just a plant, right? Like I'm not even really like, no, is anybody really that important to sometimes to other people when they simplify things like that? It's so bothersome to me, some of the legacy mindsets
yeah,
that come with it. When it's not just a plant, man. This shit is being used by people that could die tomorrow, or that I could, or if I get hit with a kidney stone because I ate a bag of peanut M&Ms and I'm not really supposed to eat that many peanuts. Like I could be putting myself in the hospital. The only way that's going to keep me out is if I down a tincture. That's what's kept me out of the hospital. Is I always got a tincture at the crib or some high potency product that'll knock me out and let the stones pass through.
yeah.
15 times, bro. Plant's just a plant. Fuck out of here with plants just a plant, man. This shit can really kill people. We just went over some of the things that can happen. Let me go read some of these health risks. Some of these health risks, people. Myclobutanol, hydrogen cyanide, a highly toxic gas when burned. That's called smoking. Health risks. Neurological damage with prolonged exposure. In 2016, we covered an article about a lab that passed some products in a brand that had this product in it. Can cause neurotoxicity, bifenthrin and permethrin, especially with chronic exposure. Health risks, tremors, hormonal disruption, abamectin, toxic if inhaled or absorbed through the skin in large quantities. Eye and skin irritation, dizziness, and in extreme cases, nervous system damage. Man, it is scary, some of this stuff. And I already got problems, and I'm using weed to solve these problems. Now I'm potentially being exposed to these other things because brands and labs don't have their shit together, or they're too for profit at the end of the day. And save the plant stuff, and let's
Yeah.
get back to the medicine stuff and
Yeah.
being safe. I think
But
that's
that's the scary part too, Joey, is the people that, like you're talking about. There are people out there that believe in the medicine. And I feel like it's the cannabis industry a decade ago, longer, that were really pushing for the fight for legalization. A lot of those people were the people that cared. They put patients over profits. They looked at this as a different thing. And I'm not saying they're all gone, but a lot of them are gone because they couldn't make it in the industry when the other side came to it, that where it wasn't in there for the patients and what was out there for the dollar. And that's the sad part about this industry, is that race for that
it's
dollar.
changed.
Yeah, it has. And there's still lights of hope, or a glimpse of hope. I think light out there at the end of the tunnel. There are brands and companies that go so much farther and above. And half the time, I don't feel like they're ever rewarded financially, and they're not. They're out there just doing it because it's a true passion. And those are the brands I really think consumers need to look for. You need to do a little bit of research. Find those brands. Find those. A lot of them, the growers that are passionate, that are doing this for the consumer and the patient. They're out there. The people making the distillates or the vape pens or the tinctures. There are specific ones that I get. I'm not going to throw a bunch of brands out there and name them, but I'm telling you, if you look around and you take a minute and you just do a little research, you'll see there are people way up here doing stuff.
There are
And
good people out there. We talk a lot about bad actors. We can highlight a couple good ones, man. There are good people out there. Groups like Beard Bros for the RSO, groups like Hometown Cultivation in Oregon for Living Soil. I'm blanking on that group out of Long Beach right now, but there's that really good group out of Long Beach that grows living soil, high end indoor. Um, Countless other groups across Washington and across. There are solid groups out there all over the place. figure out what you guys stand for, what you represent, figure out the quality, ask questions. There was a gentleman over here talking about Massachusetts. Massachusetts has great brands too. There is great products in that market. There are great products
And
in
there's a lot of problems in Massachusetts too.
absolutely,
There's a
absolutely.
lot of issues out
But
there.
I'm also not gonna. That doesn't mean everybody.
But not everyone.
It's
Yeah.
not everybody.
But
And
those people, what you should do is you should support those other ones that are the people that are doing it right. A lot of them are struggling to keep up. So anyone that wants to really support this industry, to support this thing go forward, don't forget those people that are putting patients over profits and support them by buying that product.
I appreciate you, Josh, for taking the time today. Folks, for those of you guys watching, this was another episode of the Cannabis Testing Podcast. I'm Joey J. Ping. This is Josh Swider. He's the CEO and co-founder of Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, a go-to trusted resource for all things cannabis testing, potency, terpenes, R&D, heavy metals, pesticides. These are all things that are required for the most part. Terpenes are not required, but in some states they are. These are all things that we want brands to be showing. We want to make sure that they're sharing as much information about this as possible. This is not something that you should be hiding about. This is something that we should be proud of. We should be proud of that, putting more money and effort into that and showcasing that. We want clean cannabis. We want safe products. We want to know that we're going to have a long, healthy life where we can spend lots of money across our long years on these products and enjoying them with other people. And so for those brands that you guys do already that, and you guys are committed to patients over profits, to a healthy relationship with your customers, we applaud you. We appreciate you. Please make yourself more aware. We have created a safe space for that. Please make yourself more aware so people can come to these shows and become more aware of you guys and go choose to support that. Josh is putting his money and their brand's money behind these kinds of platforms to create that culture, to create that ecosystem. So brands, reach out. Big shout out to our guest, Lyra Cannabis, yesterday for being one of those classic examples up there in Michigan. And big shout out to all the companies out there doing it right. Josh, I'll let you have the floor. Anything you want to let the people know before we get you out of here?
I think don't let people minimize some of these things like the industry does or all the industries do and say like, oh, pesticides are not that big of an issue. You guys, I've known people that have passed away from this stuff. I've known people that have negative health effects strictly from this, and they weren't that old of people. So make sure like you take that in consideration, really support the people, and really educate yourself, guys. And if not, make sure that the person educating you is educated in what they're talking about. I'm not going to sit there and talk about non-chemistry stuff. I won't, because I'm not educated as much in it. So that's all I got to say, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Where can people reach out and learn more? Where can people reach out if they have any questions?
Yeah, shout out to us, infinitechemicalanalysislabs.com. We have Instagram. We have.
If you just search Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, all the things come up on Google. I always do that every week to recreate these shows and make sure I do the marketing correct and everything. And so, guys, reach out to them. Reach out to me if you have anything. I'm happy to put you in contact. Josh, thank you again for the episode. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to rocking this with you next month. Folks, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email them over, joey@respectmyregion.com. I will bring them into the next show. And thank you guys again for watching. Talk shit about me, folks, but make sure you guys tap in and support Josh and what they're doing. They're fighting the good fight for all of us as people who love to smoke weed and love to eat edibles and take the medicine and to spread the love. So appreciate you, Josh, again. Folks, we'll see you next time.